This video is all about the much anticipated upcoming successor to the Canon EOS R, the Canon EOS R8. We have leaked specifications, but are they from known sources? Can the rumors be believed? Details coming up, but first, I encourage you to subscribe and choose all notifications so you're kept informed on the latest camera gear, news, and rumors. Asobinet published a story today that the Canon EOS R successor will be the Canon EOS R8, and they published some specifications along with that. But the source is neither known and the information hasn't been validated, so please take these specifications with a grain of salt. First up is the sensor. At first glance, the Canon EOS R8 has the exact same sensor as the Canon EOS R, a 30.3 megapixel full-frame sensor, no backside illumination and no stack, but don't switch off yet. Because if we look at the Canon EOS R7, it has the same sensor resolution as the Canon EOS 90D, 32.5 megapixels, but the Canon EOS R7 has considerably more throughput. So I do think that it's going to have an all-new sensor, it just happens to have the same resolution. And really, 30.3 megapixels is perfect for most people. Even I like that resolution. Although with the Canon EOS R5 to be able to shoot 8K or 8K over sample 4K, it does have 45 megapixels. But I gotta tell you, when you're shooting high-speed continuous stills and you get back to the office and you're looking through all those images, wow, 50 plus megabytes per image is quite a lot to deal with. So 30.3 megapixels I don't think is a negative thing, assuming we get all the throughput. And to help move an awful lot of data in the camera, we have a new image processor. Can you guess which image processor the Canon EOS R8 is supposed to have? Yeah, no surprises. The Digic X image processor, the same image processor that came out in the Canon 1DX Mark III, but has been in pretty well every other Canon camera since, including the much more affordable Canon EOS R10 at $979. And this is really good news. And while the EOS R could shoot 8 frames per second, there was an asterisk that said, well, with autofocus and auto exposure, that would drop down to 5. And if you actually had the camera, quite often the amount of perfect hits you got would often be around 2 to 3 frames per second. It wasn't really fast. With the Digic X image processor in the R8, rolling shutter should be almost eliminated, and the high-speed continuous stills should be much improved. It's an overall improvement to the camera that is rather significant. And in terms of continuous shooting, the Canon EOS R8 can shoot at 12 frames per second. Now, there's no asterisk in this saying that's without autofocus and auto exposure, but I would assume with the Digic X image processor, it can certainly do, and at this price point will do, 12 frames per second with autofocus and auto exposure. Now, is that mechanical? Is that electronic? We don't know. I'm going to assume that it's 12 frames per second mechanical, and we might get a little bit of a boost with electronic. I mean, after all, the Canon EOS R10 can shoot 15 frames per second mechanical and 23 frames per second electronic. And the Canon EOS R7, well, it can shoot 15 frames per second mechanical and up to 30 frames per second electronic. The big difference obviously being the buffer. I expect the buffer in this camera, the Canon EOS R8, to be significantly better, allowing it to shoot for longer. But 12 frames per second does seem, well, considerably slower than these APS-C cameras, the R7 and the R10. Now let's turn over to video capabilities. The Canon EOS R had 4K, 24, 25, and 30 frames per second, but there were some rather significant issues. We had a pretty big crop, rolling shutter was terrible, and, well, the autofocus system wasn't that great, and the 4K was rather soft. Canon EOS R8 can also do 4K, 24, 25, and 30 frames per second. It can also do 50 and 60 frames per second, but there are some caveats here. At 4K, 24, 25, and 30, there's no crop. No crop. That's pretty awesome. No crop, and it shouldn't be really a surprise. Canon these days is giving us no crop video at 4K. They're also giving us oversampled 4K, and there's no mention here whether this camera will do oversampled 4K or not, but I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts that it will. I mean, after all, the Canon EOS R10 for $979 can do 6K oversampled 4K, so I expect that this camera will be able to do 7K oversampled 4K. Now, in 50 and 60 frames per second, there is a crop. There's no mention what that crop is, whether it's as high as 1.7 times, or if it's down to something more manageable like a 1.1 times crop, which you get on the Canon 90D. But still, those are pretty big improvements. Will it also get Canon Log 3? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. I do suspect it will get Canon Log. It's just whether it'll get Canon Log 1, 2, or 3. And my bets are on Canon Log 3. The Canon EOS R8 is supposed to have a CF Express Type B card slot along with a UHS 2 card slot. That would be great, but this really has me doubting these rumors altogether, these specifications. It's a big red flag for me because Canon EOS R6, a camera announced 2 years ago right after the Canon EOS R5, which sells for $2,500, well, it has dual card slots. They're both UHS 2. For this camera, which is going to cost less, coming in with a CF Express Type B card slot, I mean, I hope this is true, but unless the Canon EOS R6 Mark II is on the way soon and it has a CF Express Type B card slot, I'd be really surprised the Canon EOS R8 has a CF Express Type B card slot. Another big improvement for the Canon EOS R8 is going to have IBIS. Canon EOS R didn't have IBIS. The first Canon camera to have IBIS was the Canon EOS R5, which was announced back in July of 2020 and then later released later that month. And I bought it. I was one of the first to have it. I had the Canon EOS R5 1 week before it was released, and it was great. And I still shoot with it today with firmware 1.6, 8K, 8K over sample 4K, 20 frames per second electronic. It's truly an amazing camera. Canon EOS R8 looks to be pretty impressive based on these leaked specifications. But what's missing here? Well, we don't have a price and we don't have a time frame. And yeah, I am surprised by not having any sort of time frame. Now, in terms of price, it's pretty simple. We can take a look at the Canon EOS RP, where it's at today with its manufacturer suggested retail price of $999. Then look at the Canon EOS R6 at $2,500, and basically add those two numbers together, divide by 2, and we're looking at a price of around $1,600. And no surprises, the capabilities between the two cameras should be in the middle as well. And now for a reality check. And if you really like the rumors of the Canon EOS R8 and you don't want me being a Debbie Downer here raining on your parade, I recommend clicking off. Okay, you're still here, so let me explain. And I've covered this many times before. I've talked with Craig and we are aligned with this. And Craig was the former owner of Canon Rumors. And when it comes to the Canon EOS R and the RP, they were designed by Canon to let the market know that, look, we're serious about mirrorless cameras. We're serious about professional level full frame mirrorless cameras. And they were designed as one-off cameras. There was not a roadmap to come out with an EOS R Mark II, an EOS RP Mark II. But with that in mind, if we want to think successor to the Canon EOS R, you've got the Canon EOS R and you want to think of a replacement for that camera, there really is already a replacement for the Canon EOS R, and that's the Canon EOS R6. The Canon EOS R, when it came out, had a suggested retail price of around $2,300 or $2,200. The Canon EOS R6 is $2,500. And if you look at the difference in time, you're looking at a 2% inflation rate over the years that the Canon EOS R came out back in 2018 and the announcement of the Canon EOS R6, so $2,500, and it had a much better image processor, much better sensor, although yes, I agree, 20 megapixels. Again, this wasn't a true successor to the Canon EOS R. And while Canon is planning on coming out with an R8, it's going to have less specifications than the Canon EOS R in many areas, with the exception of video, but it's going to be a lesser camera to the Canon EOS R6. The Canon EOS R6 to me is the best successor to the Canon EOS R. Don't really think of there being an EOS R Mark II. And when everybody's talking about there being an EOS R Mark II, you really want to think of the EOS R6 being that, and that the Canon EOS R8 is going to be the lesser of the R6, more or less like a mini R6. There is not going to be an EOS R Mark II. There isn't going to be an EOS RP Mark II. So in conclusion, the Canon EOS R8 is going to have some great specifications. It's going to have a new sensor with a resolution of 30.3 megapixels. It's going to have the Digic X image processor. I think that's the biggest win for this camera. It's going to have 4K up to 60 frames per second, 4K without any crop at up to 30 frames per second. It's going to have IBIS. It's going to have a CF Express Type B card slot. But again, all this information is coming from an unknown source. The information hasn't been validated. And Canon Rumors, which has also covered this story, is putting it at a CR1. And whenever I see a CR1, they're kind of nice to talk about, and they are, but don't really expect anything soon. And what I would suspect in the days and weeks coming is that this will create some noise, and then we might start to see some more news coming from Canon Rumors with a CR2, either validating this or letting us know what the Canon EOS R8 or R9 might be and when we might be able to see them. Either way, I'm really looking forward to seeing what's coming out, but really I think October is going to be all about Sony. We've got the Sony a7R5, very similar sounding and name to the Canon R5, isn't it? Anyhow, the Sony a7R5 is going to be announced on October the 26th at 3 p.m. London time or 10 a.m. New York time. And then in just a couple of days, on October the 12th, we have an announcement of a new entry-level ZV camera. Not a successor to the ZV-1, but a camera that's going to have, well, less capable features, but is going to be priced less. And I'm really curious because I think the ZV-1 at its price point is a very good camera. So I'm really curious to see in just a couple of days what this new entry-level ZV camera is going to be all about. Looks like October is going to be the month of Sony. Where's Nikon? Where's Canon? Well, Canon is supposed to be announcing the R100, an entry-level, more affordable APS-C censored camera for the R system. And that's really it for Canon. As far as Nikon goes, doesn't look like we have any credible rumors for anything coming out this month. Although How to Fly did say we were going to get an R8 announcement before the end of October at the very latest. This back in the middle of August, and of course, where are we now? Well, we've just got a couple of weeks left, and there's been no further leaks, nothing. How to Fly hasn't said a word about the R8. I believe Nikon rumors here that we're not going to get the R8, the Z6 Mark III, the Z7 Mark III until 2023 in the first half. But if you want to stay up to date on the latest camera news and rumors, I recommend hitting the subscribe button followed by clicking on all notifications. By choosing all notifications, as soon as I publish a video like this one here, you'll get notified by YouTube. So that way you can stay up to date on the latest camera news and rumors without checking all the RSS feeds, Twitter feeds, YouTube sites, and websites. It's just a much better way to stay informed. I cover all the major news for all the major brands. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.